The Chicago way.
I'm Mike Klonsky, and I'm hitting left on Lumpin' Radio this morning.
Over here, we don't mess around. Police, I call y'all to shut us down. We hear the music coming through the door. They say don't stop, y'all. Play some more. Broke some rules, pay my dues, play my blues, the Chicago way.
Welcome to the 243rd edition of Hitting Left. This is Mike Klonsky coming at you live from Chicago on Friday, March 14th. My producer this morning is Charlie Garcia. Good morning, Charlie. And he is joined by his assistant, our intern today, Caesar Yee. Did I get that right, Caesar? Good morning to both of you. In the news this morning, there's really nothing good. Court orders are being ignored. MAGA loyalists have been put in charge of the military and federal law enforcement. The Doge has stripped Congress of its powers of the purse, and news outlets that challenge Trump's dictates have been banished or put under investigation. Trump continues his assault on the cities across the U.S., but resistance is growing. This past week, there have been growing signs of resistance in cities, including protests, legal challenges, and new signs of grassroots organizing. For example, thousands have rallied in cities like Chicago, Philadelphia, and Denver to oppose actions such as immigration crackdowns, cuts in education funding, and rollbacks on LGBTQ rights. In addition to protests, scientists and academics are organizing marches and workshops to protect research and diversity initiatives threatened by federal cuts. Legal battles and lobbying efforts are also underway, with activists urging lawmakers to block policies that seem as harmful. It's a dynamic and multifaceted resistance, showing communities are uniting to defend their values. Joining us today on Hitting Left is former mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, the 56th mayor of Chicago, and a trailblazer in American politics, serving from 2019 to 2023. Mayor Lightfoot's 2019 mayoral race was a historic and transformative moment for Chicago. She emerged as a political outsider, defeating Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle in a landslide victory during the runoff election. Mayor Lightfoot secured an impressive 73.7% of the vote and winning all 50 wards in the city. We are excited to dive into her journey, her challenges, and her thoughts on urban politics in the Trump era. Welcome to the show, Mayor.
My pleasure.
Lori Lightfoot.
That's my pleasure.
Before we get into the issues facing our city, Mayor, and before we get into Trump's ICE invasion of the city, I want to ask you about a more serious question. How is Chicago women's basketball treating you and Amy and your hooping daughter, Vivian?
Well, our season, unfortunately, is over. I think the team felt very good about how they ended. They got to the sectional in the first game, defeated the number one team in the sectional in what was an upset and a great win. And I will take a point of personal privilege to say my daughter played great lockdown defense on the big scorer for Glenbard South. So we were super excited about that. Unfortunately, in the second game, they ran up against Montini, who ended up winning the 3A state championship. They lost in that sectional final, but I think it was a great experience for the girls. They've got a lot of juniors that are going to be coming back, Vivian Lightfoot included. So we're looking forward to what happens over the summer with these kids. They all play summer ball, AAU ball of various sorts, and then we'll gear up in September for another hopefully successful run.
Okay, I'm looking forward to next year.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good. And you know, my personal success was not being thrown out of a game for working the refs.
I know, I've been there myself.
My wife threatened me several times.
No, we can't do that. We can't do that. Having been both a parent, cheerer honor, and a ref myself, I'm kind of careful about that. But I know how it feels to sit there helplessly watching bad calls get made.
Oh yeah, or not made.
Or not made, yes. Well, I know you're a basketball junkie because we both end up often at the same games,
Yep.
whether it's Chicago high school ball or the WNBA, cheering for the Sky.
Yep. Look, I think this is a time like no other for women's basketball at really every level. The amount of publicity and attention, the parity amongst the college teams in particular. This, I think, women's tournament is going to be really fascinating to see who comes to the top. There have been a number of different teams that have been anointed in the polls as number one. They survive for 1 week, get beat, and then somebody else rises to the top. So I think the parity in the women's game is a great strength, and it's going to make for an incredible March Madness tournament on the women's side.
Have you got a pick for us?
You know, I'm a big fan of Dawn Staley in South Carolina. Her team has been probably a little weaker than the previous teams that went on to win the national championships. I really like Juju Watkins from USC. I think she's got amazing game.
Yeah.
But, you know, as they say in football, on any given Sunday, on any given day, who brings it to the court consistently over 4 quarters, that's really going to carry the day. Don't count out UConn, although I think they've had a lot of ups and downs. Notre Dame is very strong. They've got 2 players there, one of whom I think is in contention for National Player of the Year. So I just think it's just an exciting time.
You know, this could be your second career, or third, actually. However, you could be a basketball analyst,
well,
ESPN or something like that.
I do love it. I do love watching the games. I add my own color commentary, whether formally or not.
And the other thing I noticed about being at the same games as you have a hard time watching the game because so many people are coming up to you asking for selfies or to shake your hand. I think that's wonderful.
There's a lot of buyer's remorse, I think, out there. But, you know, the voters spoke. We have to acknowledge and accept the voters' decision, and then you move on. Okay,
well, that's big of you. I don't know.
Listen.
I'm sure a part of you.
Yeah, I have a lot of other sentiments, but I think the polite response is that one.
Okay. Well, today I decided not to spend a lot of time talking about your successor administration or too much about the internal politics of Chicago. I'm much more interested in focusing on what's happening nationally and where it connects with the city.
Yeah.
Trump and Musk and these people have really had it in for Chicago.
Yeah.
And taken their aim on this city in terms of threatening to cut back funds, actually invading Chicago with their ICE troopers, rounding up immigrants, and just causing havoc, not just in Chicago, of course, but in other cities. What's your take on that, Mayor?
Look, it's despicable the way that they're doing it, and it's also very foolish. The notion that cities like Chicago would allow their police forces to be effectively deputized or impressed into service. I'm recounting some old class where we talked about sailors who were impressed into service back in the day by kings and queens. It just doesn't make any sense, right? All the current learning on local policing is about building trust with the community, having legitimacy in the eyes of the people you are sworn to serve and protect. If you show up in a neighborhood one day, all in black, face covered, black gloves, black boots, no insignia other than police in big white or gold lettering, and then you pull some poor rascal out of a house, a school, a restaurant, or some other place of employment, you can't come back into that same neighborhood the next day as officer friendly and expect those residents to have anything other than contempt for you. So while it may serve a temporary purpose on the part of ICE, it undermines the short-term, intermediate, and long-term viability of policing in cities like Chicago, which means our city actually will be less safe and not more safe.
A couple weeks ago, there were hearings, congressional hearings, having to do with sanctuary cities. And our mayor, Brandon Johnson, our current mayor, and the mayors of Denver and Boston
and New York. Yeah.
And New York got hauled in front of these committees. My first instinct was, don't go.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a S show.
Yeah. No, and it was. I mean, look, I understand the logic behind the mayors deciding that they felt like they needed to go, because if they hadn't gone, that committee, which is run by lunatic fringe Republicans, would just issue a subpoena for them, and then you would give them another talking point, and frankly, further grounds to say, these cities are out of control, we need to cut off funding for them, blah, blah, blah. So I get why they decided, you know what, we're going to go. And, no secret, I gave some counsel and advice to Brandon Johnson. And without getting into the specifics, I think any lawyer would have told a client in this circumstance, do no harm. This was a rigged game. I likened it to kabuki theater, right? And if you saw the video, a teaser that the chairman of the committee sent out ahead of time, which, I've been around congressional hearings for 30 plus years. I've never seen anything like this clown's video making it look like it was a WWE fight and that they were coming for Chicago. But I think the advice that all the mayors probably got was do no harm. It's their game. It's their court. It's their rules. You're not going to slam dunk on these folks. You're not going to be able to preach and educate them. They don't care. This is about making those mayors and those cities look bad on a national scale. I think most mayors fared pretty well. Not surprisingly, Eric Adams got a lot of heat from the allegation that he entered into a quid pro quo with the Trump administration regarding his own personal criminal circumstances. But I think Michelle Wu really, exemplified in some ways, in her understated, intellectual, little bit nerdy, introverted way. Hey, if you really want to help us, you psychopath Paul Gosar, who was going after her, fund Medicaid, fund affordable housing. Don't cut back on education and food programs that feed the most needy in our communities. This moment that an exchange that she had that shut Gosar down went viral, as the kids say. It wasn't a particularly, unique statement by her, but just the fact that in this context that a Democrat actually pushed back on the nonsense, which frankly we haven't seen nearly enough of from Democrats at the federal level, became this moment, which again, good for her. But yeah, that hearing was a joke.
Yes, indeed. And I was thinking about that when I heard that you and other former Chicago mayors, I can't get myself to mention one of their names here on the show, but
I'm fine that you don't. Fine that you don't.
Yes, you were giving Mayor Johnson some advice, and you don't have to go into the details of that, like you said. But I think there are ways when you're in that kind of position where the game is rigged, where you can still you can still turn it around somehow, and I like to think there is, and you can do well. Anyway, you can take advantage of whatever openings there are. Do you think that you mentioned Mayor Wu from Boston? Do you think, and there was Mayor Johnson from Denver, and the New York
Mayor Adams.
Mayor Adams. I think they held their own pretty well.
Yeah.
They kind of stuck to script.
I would have called that again, in the WWE parlance, I would have called that a draw. Look, it's hard in that circumstance, and I didn't watch all of it, but I watched bits and pieces of it. And when they did, which I'm sure they were coached to do, tried to pivot to the talking points about what was actually happening in their city, to tell the truth and not buy into the lies that are being propagated, many of them got cut off because that's not what the Republicans wanted to hear.
Of course.
But I think they hung in there pretty well to get 1 or 2 points out when they were asked ridiculous questions with inflammatory lead-ins and a bunch of lies about their city. They didn't take the bait. And I think that's one of the most important things. They didn't fall into and step on the landmines that were being repeatedly put in their path.
The most interesting thing to me was that I thought the best response came from the guy from the Cato Institute.
Yes.
This
it was remarkable.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
This libertarian, kind of right-wing group, but who had done the research.
Yes.
And they came armed.
Yes. Yeah, he was. I didn't know when I first saw the hearing. I'm like, I don't recognize this guy. Who is he? And then as I heard him speak, oh yeah, he brought the wood to them. And again, they didn't want to hear it. But everything he said was 100% right. What you're doing is destabilizing cities. You're making them less safe. You're imposing the federal government's will on cities when you all have said for centuries states' rights, local rights, but now not when we disagree. So he held a mirror up to them to show their hypocrisy, and I thought he did a masterful job.
Yeah, and of course their attitude is generally research.
Yeah.
We're not interested in that. We have our line, and our line is that. You cities are violating the law by resisting the ICE invasion.
Yeah.
And really, they put their own feet in their mouths because their argument was basically that we have the right to come in and arrest people, and the local police should turn over criminals to us, even though they're not criminals.
Yes.
They haven't been. Many of them haven't even been charged with a crime or convicted.
Well, one of the big lies throughout this whole process, but particularly was prominent during the hearing, is that all these people are quote unquote illegals, right?
Yes.
I take great offense at the use of that term, but
we'll put it in quotation marks.
Yeah, air quotes, right? But the fact of the matter is most of the people that had come to cities like Chicago had actually legal status. They had been granted asylum. They were put on basically buses and told, the only way you can, the only choice you have is a free bus ticket to Chicago, New York, D.C., Denver, other places like that, or you got to get out of town. But, it's like they were given no choice but to get on these buses and come to cities like ours, of course, with no collaboration, no advance warning, all of that. But the lie is they were here in this country legally.
And they, I think some 50,000 or something came to Chicago by bus out of Texas.
That's correct.
By this Texas governor.
Yes.
We had to do the best we can without any criticisms of the current situation. How are we doing in terms of dealing with the influx of migrants here to this city? And you don't hear much about it now, so that's a good thing.
So I think looking back in the spring of 22. Greg Abbott got his legislature to appropriate state dollars for this whole escapade. And believe me, I looked at that because I thought if they're getting federal dollars, I want to make sure the Biden administration cuts them off and frankly sent those dollars to cities like Chicago to help us deal with this manufactured humanitarian crisis. What seems to have happened is the money ran out, and so they're not putting people on buses anymore. So that's lessened the immediate crisis of having these buses show up with people in various states of health. We had people show up like women who were literally about to give birth when they got to the intermediate triage station, got off the bus, and then gave birth inside of the buildings that we had set up to do the initial triage for them. We had people who were traveling with communicable diseases that went untreated because nobody in Texas cared about their health and well-being. I could go on, but it feels like that crisis has subsided, which is a good thing, because when I left office, we were on about a $25 million a month spend just in dealing with all the costs associated with helping support these folks who are coming to our city from countries like Venezuela.
You know, the history of Chicago, as you well know, has been a history of immigration.
Yes.
This city was made great, really, by waves of immigrants, whether they were coming from Europe or the Black Belt South, in terms of African American migration, and the two big waves of that, and then followed by Latino immigration. Each wave has, in a certain way, caused division and rivalry among the different communities. As one group is pitted against another, vying for jobs and kind of their place in the city in terms of power in the city. There's no difference this time around, and it seems like one of the things that Trump has succeeded in doing is widening the gulf between various communities here in the city. When you were mayor, how did you try to deal with that?
That was a big issue. I can remember, for example, we were looking at repurposing one of the 50 closed schools down in South Shore, a majority black neighborhood, and many of the people that we were going to, that we needed the space for, were Latinx, and many had come from Venezuela. And we have a great diverse immigrant community and diaspora throughout Chicago, we don't have a lot of, at least at that point, a lot of Venezuelans that could be absorbed into community, like, for example, the Ukrainians or the Afghanis when they came to Chicago. And it was a raucous community meeting, rising up in opposition and like horrible language about the browning of Black Chicago, and many, frankly, of the talking points that you would have expected and we were hearing coming from the Trump MAGA people were coming out of the mouths of people who showed up at this meeting.
Should have known better.
Yeah. Look, the reality is what I think Trump has done masterfully and I say that in a diabolical way, is really tapping into people's innate prejudices against the other. He has catapulted disinformation into, another sphere than what it ever has been, of course, aided by things like talk radio, but also aided by social media platforms. There's no lie that guy and his people won't tell. And part of their campaign strategy was basically to go after Black men in particular, to say the Democrats don't care about you. They don't see you. They're leaving you behind. They're elevating other interests over yours. And that was successful to some extent. Again, another lesson for the Democrats. It's like you got to play offense. You can't start voter engagement 6 months out from an election. And logic, unfortunately, doesn't win the day in these kinds of discussions, because when you've got somebody who's tapping into kind of guttural base prejudices, you got to fight fire with fire. And I think, frankly, as Democrats across the board, we didn't do a good enough job at that. When I got the report back from that particular community meeting and then saw videotape of the signage that people brought in, the language that they were using, I was like, holy smokes, this could be Trump sitting in that meeting.
Yeah. After we take our break, I want to get into the role of the Democrats nationally in all this.
Very timely now.
It's very timely now,
Yeah.
especially when we saw Senator Schumer
Yes.
yesterday say that he was going to vote for the CR, for the
Yeah.
continuing resolution.
Yeah, to cut $1 billion from D.C., make other funding cuts, and basically give Elon Musk and Donald Trump carte blanche. But
All
more
right.
on that after the break.
Okay. Well, that's very very good segue. Mayor Lightfoot, thank you for that. We're gonna play a little music, and then we'll come back. We're talking to Chicago former Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and stick with us. We'll be back in a couple minutes. Welcome back to Hitting Left. This is Mike Klonsky. I've been talking with the former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. We've been talking about the assault on the cities by Donald Trump and his minions. And I want to kind of get back to that. One of the last things we talked about in the first half hour was the response on the part of Democrats. Mm-hmm. And I know you are active in the Democratic Party and nationally, as well as here in this city. You ran for office and won your seat largely because of your critique of the official Democratic Party here in Chicago, alias the Machine.
Yes.
And in fact, it's amazing how things have changed since 2019. Former Machine boss Eddie Burke is in jail, and or whatever you call that place he's at. I think it's he's probably playing golf somewhere.
He's
right
in
now.
the company of the Bureau of Prisons somewhere.
Yes.
Yes.
And which is fine. I mean, I'm not big on imprisoning people. I just don't want them running our.
Yeah.
I don't want these criminals running our city. Another Machine boss is just been convicted and is awaiting sentencing. That would be Michael Madigan. Mm-hmm. Eddie Verdoliak, I think, has been in and out of jail several times since then.
The Bureau of Prisons is keeping his seat warm.
Yes. But what's new and what's happening now is that Trump and his Justice Department are threatening political leaders like Mayor Brandon Johnson, like Governor J.B. Pritzker, threatening them with criminal charges because of their defense of the city against some of the things we've been talking about earlier around sanctuary cities. So this is a change from 2019.
Yes.
Now we're definitely on the strategic defensive in this case.
So it's a change from 2019, but it feels increasingly like the playbook from 1934. And by that I mean the Nazi takeover of Germany and the desire for world domination. As we all know, Hitler was democratically elected. And once in office, started using the powers of the government at the national level within Germany to vilify racial and religious minorities. We all know, obviously, the horrific results of the Holocaust, but just dismantling checks and balances and creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. They weren't as chaotic as Trump is, so he's not as good at it as they were. But the whole point is to create one dominant power to whom residents must submit. And that's what this administration is attempting to do. So we talked about the show hearing on sanctuary cities. Now they're coming after those same cities with the Department of Justice to investigate how they handled Gaza protests and whether or not those cities gave space to anti-Semitism. So in the name of something that seems righteous, and most, I think, people believe that anti-Semitism is not acceptable in any form, and I count myself among them. But to use the Department of Justice as a weapon against these cities in a complicated and fraught issue just is trying to make them bend to the will of Donald Trump's power. And they're doing the same thing with not-for-profits. They're attacking them, defunding them. They're doing the same thing with colleges and universities, Columbia University probably being the most prominent example. But if you look at where free thought and expression flows, that's where the Trump people are trying to attack the very pillars of our democracy and free speech.
You make a great point about Germany in the 30s, but to me, it's even more reminiscent of America in the 50s.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
yes. And having lived through that as a kid, through that McCarthy period, yes. This all sounds familiar to me, and especially when I was watching the State of the Union or whatever that fiasco was in Washington.
And at 90 minutes of a Trump campaign rally.
Exactly, but that kind of baiting and kind of militarizing the Justice Department, going after political opponents, yes. Threatening them, costing them their jobs. This whole thing that Musk is doing now, forcing hundreds and hundreds or thousands. Of people out of their jobs because of their political beliefs.
And with no concern about them as individuals, what their role is with their families, creating a massive unemployment problem, particularly in those areas of the country that have high federal employment. It is reckless and dangerous, and luckily so far, the courts have held, and they're pushing back against this. Now, ultimately, some of these issues will go up to the Supreme Court. Who knows what will happen there? I mean, we saw recently the Supreme Court upheld a lower court's decision against the Trump administration, but in a remarkable, I think, departure from protocol, Justice Alito spoke publicly decrying the majority's decision in that matter. I mean, that guy, we could do a whole show on him alone. He is out of control, and dangerous. Because he's not calling balls and strikes based upon the law and the facts that are presented in individual cases. He is the most zealous publicly of carrying forward this right-wing agenda, and hopefully he's going to overplay his hand. And I never thought we'd have to rely upon Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett to be the truth tellers on that court, but they're the linchpins between disaster and restoring some semblance of our democracy.
Well, I hate to think that we're relying on them. I mean, I'm always glad to see us making use of divisions
Yeah.
in their ranks, which are
Yes.
good, and I think that's an important part of a resistance strategy. But relying to me means we have to rely on our own capabilities, our own organizing strengths, what we're doing in the communities and locally, and building a kind of force that's unassailable. And I think that can be done, and we're already seeing signs of it. But what I worry about is that the Democratic Party, which is right now the main vehicle in which that resistance has to express itself, is being still under the thumb of this old guard, this old regime,
Yeah.
whose main interest is hanging on to power at all costs.
Well, their power's gone, right? I mean, that's just not a thing. I think the dynamic that I've seen play out, particularly in discussions with mayors all across the country, is there's a lot of fear and a gaping lack of leadership. I mean, I was in conversations with mayors in late January into early February where they were afraid to say anything negative or critical publicly, literally afraid to do that. I think they're finding their voice as time passes, in part because others are taking up the mantle and filling that void and going to court, organizing the protests. But elected leadership on the Democratic side is a pale imitation of its former self, unfortunately. And then, if I might, because this is like one of my issues du
Go
jour,
for it, Mayor.
we see these Democrats like Gavin Newsom and the other person who will not be named in this forum, walking in the racist, divisive culture war footsteps and attacking, for example, trans community,
Yes.
like another small minority, and elevating these concocted issues that are not what the trans community is leaning into, that's basically fighting for its basic survival and wanting to have the same rights of citizenship that anyone else in America would have. But you see these Democrats making jokes about bathrooms, making jokes about sports, when something more fundamental is at stake, and it's whether or not we are a country that stands for civil rights and protections for all. When you see that happening with these Democrats who aspire to greater power, greater office, greater leadership, man, are we lost or what?
I was struck at that State of the Union address to see, number one, to see when Representative Al Green spoke up, raised his cane, and called out Trump around Medicare
Yep.
cuts, and they escorted him out of the chamber, and
Yeah, not so politely.
not so politely, and no Democrats jumped up in his place
Yes.
or walked out with
Right.
him. It made me ashamed of the party.
And then, as we were talking, Mike, when the censor vote went forward, 10 Democrats joined the Republicans in censoring him.
That was stunning.
It just, in the latest, over the last 24 hours, is Leader Schumer saying he's going to vote for the CR, which devastates funding
Yes.
across the board, takes $1 billion out of Washington, D.C., which apparently the Republicans want to turn into a plantation of their own ownership and control, and gives this power and flexibility on how to manage those appropriations, cedes that power to Trump and Musk. What is going on in
And
D.C.?
it affirms Musk's power.
Yes,
It
yes.
affirms his ability
Yes.
to just dismantle, for example, the Department of Education.
Yes.
Which they're doing. In fact, have basically done already.
Right. Which they want so that they have an argument in court, so they don't keep losing like they have been. I rarely do this, But I reached out to Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth and urged both of them to vote no on that CR. We'll see what happens. The vote is supposed to be happening later today, but I was stunned and disappointed that Schumer, of all people, bent over and capitulated.
Yeah, and but he's not alone. It seems like this is a major issue within the party. Any kind of opposition to the old guard well, this isn't the first time, and it goes back to the Sanders campaign back in 2016, where I remember here in Illinois, Bernie was running even with Hillary Clinton in the primaries, and they panicked and put their thumb on the scale and probably cost him the election. Or I don't know if he would have won, but it certainly killed any chance he had. And since then, any kind of progressive opposition has been stifled or crushed, even if they knew it would mean losing the election to Trump, as we saw this year. Yeah. Around.
Well, look, I think there's a couple of dynamics that are going on here. That is definitely one of them. But if you look at what voter turnout is going back several cycles, and I'll take Cook County as an example. Not that long ago, when I ran in 2019, we were in the low 30s, which I thought was abysmal. Well, in November, where there was supposed to be this election I'll go back even last year in the primary in Cook County when we were trying to decide who's going to be the next state's attorney. Everybody's concerned about violence and crime in the city. State's attorney's race is open for the first time in 8 years, and people are very concerned. The turnout was in the 20s. And then again last November when, we were all doing all kinds of things here and across the country and Operation Swing State and on and on and on, we barely got into the 20s in turnout. So part of the problem is not just a void in leadership, but the voters are turned off because we're not giving them something to vote for, to not just be against Trump, but to articulate a vision of today and tomorrow that is going to speak to the moment that I think the average voter is in. And look, I don't think we can have this conversation either without talking about the continuing effects of COVID-19. I think what we've seen coming out of 2020 at the height of COVID or 2021 is this anger and rage that people feel justified in articulating. You're seeing it in poll after poll, but we are still very much in the throes of the after effects of COVID that is impacting our view of ourselves, our lives, the direction, right way, wrong way. COVID-19 is still affecting us.
Yeah, that's a great point. When you were elected, when you came into office as a rookie mayor, you were faced with some of the most incredible challenges any mayor ever in this country had to face. One was as you mentioned, the COVID pandemic, a global pandemic, which was devastating, and two, an economy that was in
free fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and crime was a big issue. Mm-hmm. You had to deal with all those things, and I don't want to go back over all that because we don't have that much time. But Trump has been playing those same cards again in a certain way, saying that the crime is at the highest level it's ever been in the history of this country. That's what he said the other day.
Which, of course, is not true.
It's not true.
At all.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, when I came into office, Trump was in year 3 of his presidency. And in the spring of 2019, much like what we're experiencing now, he and his folks at DHS and at CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, were rattling the saber of illegal immigration.
Yeah.
And I remember walking neighborhoods in our city, commercial districts, both at in Little Village and in North Argyle Street, where there was this threat of ICE agents coming in. Sounds very familiar and reminiscent. And people were terrified. Businesses were hurt. Then we flow into
But there was also a grassroots movement to try to stop
significant grassroots movement. And I'm proud to say we funded a massive Know Your Rights campaign. We supported the various immigration advocates who did, I think, a tremendous and heroic job getting people to understand they didn't have to open the door. They didn't have, there was no legitimate basis to leave if there wasn't a judge signed order. A massive amount of education. That's happening again now, but the level of chaos and fear that's been generated this time, it eclipses what happened in 2019. Same playbook, but amplification of the fear and the chaos that I think, advocates are still sorting their way through. But it's so many similarities from that time.
What's happened since that time with police reform?
Mm-hmm.
I remember that was a major issue. You don't hear anything about that anymore.
Which is pretty remarkable, right?
Yeah.
Look, we still have a long way to go. The Chicago Police Department is still under a consent decree. It has fallen off the radar screen in the last year because it's been a year and a half because it's been eclipsed, I think, by other issues. Like, every time our monitor was issuing a report, it was a 3-day news cycle. I haven't heard anything about that. She's still out there. She's still doing work, but it's a long way away from that. And look, part of it is we haven't solved all the problems, but we have an attention span issue where this is just not top of mind.
You still have the same leadership in the police union. I hate to call it a union, but you fought like heck with them.
Yes, sir.
But I don't hear anything about them anymore.
Well, part of it is because I got a contract that we wouldn't have given them. They're happy. And again, I don't want to go too far down this path, but they don't have anything to complain about, frankly, because they got more money. We had already negotiated the monetary package. Then they got more money with the changing of the guards on top of that. And they got work rule changes that, frankly, I don't think were legal. But also, interestingly enough, and I've seen some of the folks that were the plaintiffs that helped drive the consent decree process forward. So where are you guys? What are you doing? This, and this are against state law. Where what are you doing? Why are you sitting on the sidelines? So it's all very interesting, but it's faded from the top of above the fold, but those issues are still there, no question.
We've only got a few minutes left, Mayor.
It's been a quick hour, Mike. Great conversation.
Well, we need to do this regularly.
I'm committed.
Okay, you heard that. You're a witness, Charlie. No, we're going to do that somehow. I'd like you to sum up in a way how you think the global politics play out in terms of urban politics here in the city now, in the period ahead.
Look, I think we have got to find our backbone to keep pushing back against Trump. I'm reminded during this period when Newt Gingrich came into prominence back in the 90s, and Bill Clinton was the president, and there were all the Democratic Party, wrong way, we got to rethink ourselves, blah, blah, blah. Bill Clinton, I will say, was a master at playing Newt Gingrich, but there was a book that came out called, interestingly, Tell Newt to Shut Up. And the premise of the book was, when Republicans have power, they always overplay their hand. And the thing that gives me hope in this moment is that we're seeing it now. This is like such an extreme, at least in my lifetime. I take your point about the 1950s during the McCarthy era, but the Republicans are going to overplay their hand. We're seeing this played out in the fact that Republican House members are not having town halls, virtual or otherwise, because they're afraid of voter anger, right? Because their voters, rock rib Republicans who voted for Donald Trump, did not vote for cuts in Medicaid and Medicare. They did not vote for upending their daily lives, making the economy worse, putting people on the unemployment line. So I have confidence that what we will see this year, leading into the midterms, is a Republican overreach that will start to backfire on them. I think it's already happening. Now, that's not enough. What will the Democrats do? What we cannot do is be Republicans. We cannot be a watered-down version of the right wing. That's what's so disturbing to me.
The neocons is what we did last time. Yeah,
that's what's so disturbing to me with things like Newsom. You know, first it was Charlie Kirk, and then on his latest podcast, it was Steve Bannon, for Lord's sake. That's a losing formula. We've got to be true to who we are. We've got to be the party of the working man and woman. We've got to understand and articulate the values that our folks are worried about as they sit around their kitchen tables, as they lay awake at night worrying about, what the next day is going to bring, their income and their ability to take care of themselves and their families. That's who we need to be in this moment.
Well, that is a great note to go out on. Mayor Lori Lightfoot, former Mayor Lori Lightfoot. I still call you Mayor. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks to Charlie Garcia. Thanks to Cesar for doing the work in the board today.
Mike, you got me fired up, so maybe I'll.
And you, me too. Let's go get them together.
We need to.
Until next week, this is Mike Klonsky asking you to keep on hitting left. And as Nina Simone is about to say, let's keep it real.
Please thrill me with your kisses sweet. Tell your papa and your mama, one day soon we're gonna